Summaries.
I'm Brooke.
And I'm Cami.
And welcome to Bookish Realms. Today's episode kicks off our Throne of Glass series deep dive, starting with chapters 1 through 7. For this episode, the chapter summaries and character discussion are spoiler-free, but the rest of the pod does include spoilers for all of Throne of Glass. This podcast is for mature audiences only. Let's get into it.
Let's get into some chapter summaries. As a reminder, this is a non-spoiler section, so if you haven't finished Throne of Glass, you can listen to this section. Chapter 1, we meet our baby, Selena Sardathian, who's been a slave in the salt mines of Endovir for the last year. Cale Westfall, captain of the Royal Guard, is escorting her through the hallways. Selena has no idea where they're going, but keeps repeating to herself, "I will not be afraid." Before she knows it, she's standing in front of a handsome young man, the Crown Prince of Otterland. Chapter 2, Selena and the Crown Prince of Otterland are not hitting it off. Selena meets Duke Parrington, who is red-faced with thinning hair, and insists that Selena bow and show her respect for the prince. The Prince of Otterland, aka Dorian Haviliard, couldn't care less about all of that and dismisses Parrington. We learn that Selena is very young and has been in the slave camp for a year. Oh, and yeah, she's Otterland's greatest assassin. In that time, she attempted one escape and managed to kill her overseer 23 sentries and almost made it over the wall. Anyway, back to business. Why is the Crown Prince there? He has a proposition for Selena. Chapter 3. The prince wants Selena to be the king's champion and essentially do his dirty work. At first, she scoffs it off. The prince goes on to explain that to become the king's champion, she'll have to win the title through a competition. If she succeeds, she'll be free in 5 years. They go back and forth and agree that she'll gain her freedom in 4 years. She accepts, but if she loses, she'll be sent back to Endovir.
Dun dun dun!
Chapter 4. She gets scrubbed down that night. Cale comes to grab her the next morning, and he's shocked she's sleeping on the floor. Selena steps out into the sunlight with Cale, and they make their way toward the wall to start their journey to Otterland. As Selena exits Endovir, she thinks of the slaves and reflects on her time there. By mid-morning, they've hit Oakwald Forest. Selena tries to pry some personal info out of Cale, but he is not a fan of that and shuts it down. Chapter 5. They're still making their way through the forest. Selena thinks about her past and the last time that she was in Oakwald Forest. We get some info about the forest, the Fae, and Otterland's corrupt king, who is the prince's daddy. They camp out for the night. The next morning, Selena wakes up to discover some curious gifts that were left for her to find. Chapter 6. This is a long journey. They're 2 weeks in and traveling through the continent. It's cold and miserable. They get to a hilltop, and Dorian insists Selena check out the view of Rifthold and his father's glass castle. Selena thinks it's tacky, 'cause it is. Captain Cale asks Selena how she was captured, and she reveals that she thinks she was betrayed by another assassin. We briefly switch to Dorian's POV. Long story short, he thinks she's cute. Chapter 7. They arrive in Rifthold, and it's a big to-do. They're parading her through the city. Selena once again notices the slaves at the dock. It brings up a lot of emotions and memories for her. Finally, they arrive at the glass castle. Dorian drops the bomb that the competition begins tomorrow. He leaves her in her new chambers, which she's a fan of. Our assassin sleeps for an hour, but then a servant arrives to get her some new clothes. We meet Philippa Spindlehead, who is Selena's personal servant. We're back to Dorian's POV. He's meeting with his father, who has no faith in Dorian's choice for champion. Their interaction is nasty. Safe to say, Dorian and his dad won't be going golfing anytime soon.
Okay, now we can move on to character discussions. Here we'll cover what we've learned about each main character and track their character development. This section is also spoiler-free. Let's start with our female main character, Selena Sardathian. She's 18 and was enslaved in the salt mines because she was an assassin in Otterland. During this section, we learned that at 8 years old, she was found by Arabin Hamel on the banks of the frozen rivers in Oakwald Forest. He took her under his wing and trained her to become an assassin. He raised her at the Assassin's Keep, which is on the border of Otterland and Terrasen. Arabin Hamel is the king of the assassins. When we first meet her, Selena has lost all hope. She's resigned herself to her fate at the mines and seems genuinely terrified when she's asked to meet with Cale and Dorian. In these first few chapters, we see some of her spunky, sassy personality, but she's definitely battling some demons. We also learn about her care for others, since she revealed that she's freed almost 200 slaves from the pirate lord. She says even that was not enough, which shows us the hope she has for a better world and is willing to fight for it.
Baby Dorian.
Mr. Dorian Havillard. I'm just kidding.
He's so cute.
Oh, we love him. Okay, let's jump into our crown pins.
Our crown pins.
I hate it here. Let's jump into our crown prince and the son of the king of Otterland, Dorian. He's tall, has big blue eyes, raven's black hair, and is achingly handsome. He has a polished smile and reeks of court-trained charm. When Celaena meets him, she's upset that he's both royal and beautiful. He's a huge flirt. Dorian goes to Endovier because he believes that Celaena would be a good fit for the competition his father is putting on to pick a king's champion. Dorian's open to bartering and loves to go back and forth, which we learn when he makes a deal with Celaena to give her freedom after 4 years instead of 5. We learn the most about Dorian when he talks to his father. Dorian challenges his father and talks back to him, which earns him a literal slap in the face. He might be the king's son, but he has his own opinions and viewpoints. They also look nothing alike. On the other hand, Dorian's younger brother, Holland, resembles their father. Cale Westfall, whose name is not Cole, the captain of the guard. He's only 22 and has been captain of the guard for 2 years. He's young and ambitious. He's got a rugged face, chestnut brown hair, and golden brown eyes. Celaena, unfortunately, does not find him excessively handsome, which is a sick burn. Celaena pokes at his past and learns that Cale could bear the title of the Lord, but doesn't. He's unmarried. He's very strict and a rule follower. He is not a fan of Celaena and doesn't agree with Dorian's reasoning for bringing her back for this competition. Okay, now that we've talked about our main characters, let's get into our side characters for now. The King of Otterland, we don't know his name. That doesn't come up later or anything. The father of Holland and Dorian, and ruler of Otterland and most of Aurelia. If you asked him about his long-term goals, he would be ruler of the world. In his quest, he erases all of the magic in the continent, killing all the fairies and any person who showed a hint of magic in their bloodline. He doesn't take kindly to people questioning his authority and often resorts to violence to make his point. Duke Parrington, otherwise known as the King's Watchdog. Initially, when he meets Celaena, he wants her to respect the king, but she is not having any of that. His large frame, obsidian eyes, and thinning hair have Celaena baring her teeth and hissing. Duke Parrington is also sponsoring Cain. We'll learn a little bit about him later, for the competition for King's Champion. King Brannon, Fae, owner of Oakwall Forest. This is all we know for now, but we will touch on him more throughout the book.
Let's explore this world. Here we cover the main world-building elements that come up in chapters 1 through 7. We'll revisit these places and world-building elements in other episodes. This section is spoiler-free. Endovier. We don't learn much about this slave camp other than it's a salt mine. Celaena spent a year there. It's a place you go to work and die. We'll do a deeper dive on Endovier when we cover Kingdom of Ash, which is really when it comes into play. Oakwall Forest. I love Oakwall Forest. This forest surrounds Endovier and serves as a continental divide between the civilized countries of the east and the uncharted lands of the west. As our girl Celaena steps into these enchanted woods, she's immediately hit with memories of the eerie and legendary folks who once called this place home. To some extent, Oakwall remains untouched, with leaves that dangled like jewels, tiny droplets of ruby, pearl, topaz, amethyst, emerald, and garnet, and a carpet of such riches coated the forest floor around them. This is just beautiful language. She uses gemstones to describe the leaves and the way they coat the forest floor. It shows us how precious the forest is to Celaena. While chatting with the soldiers escorting her, Celaena warns them that this is Brannon's forest, and the trees remember him. This magical forest dates back over 2,000 years. Cale asks her what else she knows about this forest. Celaena says that's all she knows. But we see you, Celaena. She's protecting this magical place and her cherished memories of it. She does remember all those stories and those who inhabited this land. The forest had once been filled with fairies, gnomes, sprites, nymphs, goblins, and more. Oakwall is surrounded with legends of dark, terrible glens and deep, still pools, and caves full of light and heavenly singing. This forest is everything we adore about fantasy, a place where legends come to life and magic is real, but it also hits us right in the feels. Celaena wraps up her reminiscing with, "But now they were only stories and nothing more." As readers, we can't help but feel the loss of this magical past as Celaena shares her own nostalgia and longing. The Oakwall Forest is a reminder of the beauty and mystery that once was and could possibly rise again.
Looking at the map, Otterland is on the eastern part of Aurelia and is almost smack dab in the center. It is currently ruled by the Havillard family, who mostly live in the capital city of Rifthold. As they approach, Dorian encourages Selena to see the view of Rifthold. She sees the glass castle and describes it as gargantuan, a vertical city of shimmering, crystalline towers and bridges, chambers and turrets, domed ballrooms, and long, endless hallways. It has been built above the original stone castle and cost a kingdom's wealth to construct. She thinks back to the first time she saw it and how even then she found the castle tasteless, a waste of resources and talent. Even though she doesn't think highly of it, there seems to be a tug to look at the castle, and she can't seem to look away. As they enter Rifthold, there are trumpets playing and crimson flags with gold wyverns flapping in the wind. The cobblestone streets are cleared for the grand entrance of Dorian, Selena, Kale, and the rest of their group, but we can't be fooled by the glamour. Selena's face tells a different story. Why? Because beneath the spicy aromas and scent of the horses lies a foundation of filth, blood, and spoiled milk. There's something rotten about Rifthold. The procession continues on and we enter the shopping district, where the crowd swelled between the trees lining the broad avenues of white stone. There's a sea of people, all wanting a glimpse of the royal procession. Selena can't help but feel a ravenous sort of hunger as they pass the shops filled with dresses, tunics, jewelry, and more. Our assassin wants to shop. There's so much flaunting of wealth and power. As they turn onto the street along the Avery, a whole new world opens up. Ships are docked along the pier, and sailors are too busy with their ropes and nets to notice them passing by. But again, a darker reality hits. At the sound of a whip, her head snapped to the side. Selena sees slaves staggering down the gangplank of merchant ships, a mix of conquered nations with hollow, raging faces. Most are prisoners of war, rebels, or ordinary folk caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Chained and working the docks, lifting and sweating, their eyes never meeting what's before them. Selena's heart just breaks. She wants to scream, to leap from her horse and declare that she's not a part of this cruelty. It's like she's ripped from reality and she has difficulty breathing. The city continues to cheer, bow, and throw flowers, oblivious to the storm raging inside her. Our first view of Rifthold is a glimpse at a city full of contrast. Suffering and luxury coexist as Selena is about to be at the center of it all. Now we enter the infamous Glass Castle. 600 rooms, military and servants' quarters, 3 gardens, a game park, and stables on either side, Dorian declares, looking at his home. But Selena can't fathom the need for such extravagance. She gives him a weak smile. The idea of sleeping in a glass castle? Hard pass. Heights and glass walls don't mix well for her stomach. She shifts her focus to the massive castle gates. The doors are made of a cloudy red glass, gaping like the mouth of a giant. Selena's chambers are in the stone wing of the castle, far away from the anxiety-inducing glass walls. Kale gives her the grand tour, and she takes mental notes. 12 windows, 1 exit, and 9 guards. It's bigger than she could ever imagine. She's living large, with a spacious bedroom with an attached bathing chamber and a dressing room, a cozy dining room perfect for intimate meals, and a music and gaming room. We're sticking with the same color scheme, gold and crimson, fit for royalty, of course. Her bedroom boasts a giant tapestry on one wall. She's also got a balcony where she can look down at the gardens. After her grand tour, Selena re-enters her chambers and notes that something about the dimensions seemed a little off, something with the height of the walls, but she couldn't be sure.
All right, welcome to our analysis and foreshadowing section, which is not spoiler-free. We'll break down parts of the text that tie into or foreshadow future events in the series. We'll always start by introducing a direct quote, so if you have not read all of Throne of Glass, please do not continue. We divided this section into 3 parts, Selena's past, Selena's future, and our villains. We'll probably have to add sections as necessary when we make our way through all of the books. Okay, let's get into it. Brooke, what stood out to you about Selena's past?
Well, there's this really interesting phrase that keeps coming up. On page 2, we see, "I will not be afraid."
This phrase appears throughout the series, reminding us of Sam's influence on Selena. R.I.P. our king.
R.I.P. It helps her stay focused during tough times and honors her first true love.
Oh, we miss him. 0 days that I haven't cried over him, but that's okay. And speaking of interesting details, did you catch what Dorian says about Selena's eyes?
Oh my gosh, yes. He says, "What remarkable eyes you have."
This is actually a huge clue about Selena's true identity as an Ash River. Her eyes and how they look like directly connect her to her heritage and kind of give her away.
It's actually so crazy that Dorian notices this right off the bat.
Absolutely. Now, there's a really powerful moment on pages 22 and 24 about Celaena's scars. The text says, she became all too aware of the 3 long scars down her back. Even if she won her freedom, even if she lived in peace in the countryside, those scars would always remind her of what she'd endured, and that even if she was free, others were not. These scars represent so much in Celaena's journey.
They really do. They start as a reminder of her painful past, but evolve as she grows into her true identity as queen.
Yeah, and honestly, one of the most painful moments is in Kingdom of Ash, when the removal of these scars actually makes her question her whole journey, because they represent so much, her scar from Nehemia, her Karanam scar with Rowan, she loses all of those.
Girl, that's such a great point. On page 25, we get our first mention of the Witch Kingdom. What did you think about that?
I think it's definitely intriguing. The quote goes, "The cruel and bloodthirsty descendants of the fallen Witch Kingdom. Celaena had once met a young woman from that cursed land, and though she turned out to be both cruel and bloodthirsty, she was still just a human, and had bled like one."
This is referring to Ansel, who we'll meet later in Assassin's Blade.
It's interesting how Celaena's perspective on Ansel changes over time, and also her perspective on witches in general changes over time.
This is so true because it also introduced the Western Wastes, which becomes important later on in the series.
Yeah, and they take that back.
Period. On page 29, we get some interesting details about Celaena's early life. The text says, she'd been newly orphaned, and even at 8, she knew that a life with a Robin with a new name that no one would recognize, but someday everyone would fear, was a chance to start over, to escape the fate that led her to leap into the icy river that night 10 years ago.
Again, this reveals so much about Celaena's past, but also her desire to escape her destiny and her fate.
Yeah, girl, it's a subtle hint at her true identity as Aelin and her royal heritage.
We get so many clues at the beginning.
We really do.
Speaking of hints, there's a really revealing passage on page 31 about magic and the King of Otterland. It says, "The King of Otterland had outlawed it all, magic, fae, fairies, and removed any trace so thoroughly that even those who had magic in their blood almost believed it had never really existed, Celaena herself being one of them. The king had claimed that magic was an affront to the goddess and her gods, that to wield it was to impertinently imitate their power. But even though the king had banned magic, most knew the truth. Within a month of his proclamation, magic had completely and utterly disappeared of its own accord. Perhaps it had realized what horrors were coming."
This passage is packed with foreshadowing about the king's power and the disappearance of magic.
It's also one of the first hints about Celaena's own magical heritage, when it says Celaena herself being one of them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that theme continues in the next quote from the same page. "Many of the magic users who hadn't been burned wound up prisoners in Endovier. Most didn't survive long there. It had been a while since she'd contemplated the gifts she lost, though the memory of her abilities haunted her dreams. Despite the carnage, perhaps it was good that her magic had vanished. It was far too dangerous for any sane person to wield. Her gifts might have destroyed her by this point."
Again, just another huge hint about Celaena's lost powers. It really confirms 2 things for us. 1, that Celaena had powers, and 2, that she had too much power. It was going to consume her. It would have destroyed her.
It also kind of helps foreshadow the challenges that she might face when magic returns.
Yeah, she spends all of Heir of Fire trying to just get control of these powers. On page 37, we get another interesting quote about Celaena's fate. "Magic was dead, the fae were banished or executed, and she would never again have anything to do with the rise and fall of kingdoms. She wasn't fated for anything, not anymore."
I think that this shows how disconnected Celaena feels about her true destiny at this point. She's not really sure what she wants to do.
But she's fated for so much. It's really ironic considering what we know about her future role and everything that she ends up doing for the kingdom.
Yeah, we love her. We're fans. We're Aelin stans. Now let's talk about some hints about Celaena's future. On page 32, we meet the little folk. "She didn't dream, but when she awoke, she couldn't believe her eyes. Small white flowers lay at the foot of her cot, and many infant-sized footprints led in and out of the tent. Before someone could enter and notice, Selena swept a foot over the tracks, destroying any trace, and stuffed the flowers into a nearby satchel.
This shows Selena's hidden connection to the magical world. Even if she might try to hide it, the little folk know what's up.
Her secretive reaction hints at something she's hiding about her pest. Again, she kind of feels like there's some power there and she knows, but she's not ready to admit that yet.
I also just love the idea of little fairies putting little flowers. That's so cute. There's another small but significant quote on page 42. What a ridiculous idea. A castle made of glass. This just becomes pretty ironic later in the series, doesn't it?
I think so, girl. Absolutely.
Yeah, they blow that bitch up.
And speaking of the castle, there's an interesting observation Selena makes about her room on page 43. Something about the dimensions seemed a little off. Something with the height of the walls, but she couldn't be sure. Regardless, the canopy provided plenty of hiding places.
Hidden room. Hidden room. This is our first hint at the passages hidden in the castle that Selena will later explore.
And it also kind of helps with the foreshadowing of discoveries that Selena makes that kick off major plot points. Hint, Elena.
We're looking at you, girl.
We're not fans.
There's not enough Elena slander in the world. Okay, here's a quote that really threw me for a loop. And maybe other people have a better idea of what this refers to. Maybe I'm just not remembering. But Kale and Selena are outside in the garden. They're looking at the gargoyles. And the quote says, "You'd see something like this before the gates of Word, not in a garden." What is this? I know what a word gate is. I know what a word stone is, what a word key is. But I swear I don't remember gates of Word coming up again. It's reminiscent of gates of hell, gates of heaven,
Yeah. Or is it a hint to the word gates Selena/Aelin will eventually open?
I don't know, but it really stood out to me on this reread, and it's something I want to follow up on.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to definitely highlight for later.
All right, and now let's talk about our villains. There is a subtle but chilling description of Parrington on page 7. His obsidian eyes glittered as his grip tightened on her neck. Valgalur.
This is our first hint at Parrington's true dark nature.
The mention of his black eyes is really significant, given what we learn later. That really becomes the marker for someone that's taken over by a valid prince or king, is their eyes is the dead giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so SJM to hide all of these hints that somewhat define the rest of the series within the first 7 chapters of the first book, knowing that we'll forget about them by the time they become relevant. I did not remember any of these hints by the time that the big reveal happens in Crown of Midnight.
When we first read these chapters, there were so many times where we were like,
no way! Yeah.
So we can't wait to continue to deep dive throughout this series and catch all the little things that we didn't catch the first time.
She gives so much away here. It's crazy.
Oh, we love her.
And lastly, our favorite quotes. These are moments in these chapters that we just really loved. Here's my first favorite quote. "Still, the image haunted his dreams throughout the night. A lonely girl gazing at the stars and the stars who gazed back." If you know, you know. We're not going to get into the possible connections this quote has just yet. This is Selena from Dorian's POV. This is where she starts, lonely, detached, and lost. I love a title drop, especially one that has a decent amount of meaning. This quote is a perfect example of the relationship between Dorian and the king. The Crown Prince of Otterland stared at his father unblinkingly, waiting for him to speak. Seated on his glass throne, the King of Otterland watched him back.
And lastly, I will not be afraid. Selena often says this when she is facing the unknown, and by her stating that, it gives her the strength to continue on.
And continue on, she does.
And that wraps up our deep dive into chapters 1 through 7 of Throne of Glass. We hope you enjoyed our analysis and theories. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok, where our handle is @BookishRealmsPod.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on these chapters, so drop us a comment or send us a message. Also, leave us a rating if you liked what you heard. It really helps us out.
Join us in 2 weeks when we'll be discussing chapters 8 through 15. Until then, keep reading, Assassins.
Bye!